Welcome back to another MECH 1000 video. In this video we are starting our last blueprint reading unit of the semester. It is Unit 16 from the textbook, and it is about weldments. So a weldment is basically anything that is made from individual pieces of metal that have been welded together. So we could probably spend an entire semester talking about welding, the different types of metals that can be welded, and the different methods of welding. But we're not really focused on that in this class. We basically just need to know the basics of what welding is, and most importantly, how to create or read weld symbols that you will see on a drawing. So the first thing we need to know in order to understand weld symbols is to understand the ways in which two pieces of metal can be joined together. So we could just take two flat pieces of metal and butt them up against each other to create a butt joint. Or perhaps these two plates are meeting at a 90-degree angle to create a T-joint. Or they could be, their ends could meet at a 90-degree corner to make a corner joint. Or perhaps one piece overlaps the other to create a lap joint. Or the two edges, rather than being butted against each other, are side by side, and we have an edge joint. So these are 5 different ways that metal plates can be joined together. And then once we join those pieces together, we can weld them with different shapes of welds. Some of these shapes work better or just lend themselves to the different types of joints, and we'll see that here in a moment. But the shapes of the welds themselves include fillet and grooves. Grooves can be shaped differently. We can have V grooves, J grooves, or U grooves. We could have a plug or slot weld, and a back or backing weld. So this is a good illustration that shows different joints, different welds, and how they can be used together. So the first type of weld or shape of weld is a fillet, and this can be used for a corner or a T-joint. So when you have these two pieces of metal that join together at a 90-degree angle, you can basically fill in the corner with a fillet weld. So in cross-section, a fillet weld looks like a triangle, and as we'll see later, the symbol for a fillet weld is a triangle, so that's where it comes from. It comes from this basic shape, and then it goes along the length of the joint. And it may be continuous, or there may be increments of weld with spaces in between. Then we have, when we have two pieces of metal that are butted up against each other, if you prepare one or both of the plates, you can create these different types of groove welds. So this is an example of a bevel groove, where one side of the plate is just left cut off at a 90-degree angle. The other one is angled back, and so it leaves an opening. When you weld, you're actually adding material. You're adding a weld material, and it is melted either using flame or electric current, and it fuses together the two pieces of metal as well as the additional weld material that's being added. All 3 of those fuse together. And so preparing a groove like this allows for some space for that weld material to fill in. So other groove profiles include a square groove, where you basically just leave a space in between the two edges. If you bevel both plates, you can create a V-shaped groove. Okay, so you can see pretty clearly why that is called V-shape. Or you could remove a quarter circle out of one side, and that's what we call a J groove. And if you prepare both plates, both sides of it like that, that creates a U groove. A plug or slot weld is used when you have one plate sitting on top of another, and you have a hole or a slot cut into it, and you basically fill that up with weld material, and that welds all of these pieces together, the top and bottom, and the weld material actually fills up the hole. And then if you just lay a bead of weld on top of the two pieces that are butt joined without allowing for a groove here, that is what we call just a back or backing weld. So, as I said, the purpose of this class is not to teach you how to become a welder, but instead, we're just interested in creating and reading the weld symbols. So, these symbols are created by the American Welding Society, and in its simplest form, a weld symbol is a reference line with an arrow pointing to the weld. So this is the basic bare bones of a weld symbol, just a horizontal line with an arrow pointing to the weld. The tail here is kind of optional. Sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't. So the simplest kind of weld symbol is just a line with the arrow. And then we are going to add stuff to this line. Okay, so the arrow, if we have, let's imagine we have a T-joint. We have two plates here. So if we have our weld symbol pointing here, so this joint, where these two plates meet each other, has two sides. This side, where the arrow points to, is the arrow side. Then we also have the other side of the joint. So there are two sides. The symbol or arrow points to one. And so we have the arrow side and the other side. So we are going to attach weld symbols to our reference line. And if that symbol gets added below the line, that is going to be considered the arrow side. And if the symbol is put above the reference line, that is the other side. Or if we have symbols both above and below, then that means the weld goes on both sides of the joint. And here are the basic weld symbols that we're going to use. As I said before, the fillet weld in cross-section looks like a triangle, and so that's why its symbol is a triangle. The vertical side of the triangle is to the left, and then it slopes diagonally to the right, either down and to the right, or up and to the right. Okay, so we have fillet welds. Again, if it's below the reference line, that means the weld goes on the arrow side. And if it's above the reference line, that means the weld goes on the other side. We have all these different shapes of grooves, and so the symbols kind of copy what the grooves themselves look like. Square groove is just two parallel lines. A bevel groove is a vertical line and a diagonal line going to the right. either down and to the right or up and to the right. V groove, especially on the other side, you can see that V shape. When it's on the arrow side, it's an inverted V. Then we have the J groove, a vertical line, the little quarter circle attached to it, quarter circle arc. And then the U shape is a short little vertical line with a semicircle attached to it. This rectangle symbol is used for plug or slot welds, and then a semicircle with no vertical line here is used for back or backing welds. A couple other symbols to note. This circular symbol here, where the arrow meets the reference line, if there's a circle, that means all around. So this might be used if you have a cylindrical pipe sitting on top of a base plate and you want to weld all the way around, put that weld all around, including on the back side. You would use that symbol. This flag, which points away from the arrow, is used to indicate a field weld. So that means it's a weld that has to be done on the job site. It can't be done in advance in the shop. And that can be significant to the welder, especially in the bidding process. If you're estimating how much time and money a job is going to be, it's important to know if you can do the weld in the shop, which can be done under controlled conditions and convenient and clean, versus a field weld done in the field. You might have to deal with weather conditions. It could be dirty. The location of the weld could be difficult to get to, and so field welds are more expensive. The symbols we talked about on the previous slide are going to be attached to the reference line, either below or above the reference line, and there may be a couple numbers following them, indicating maybe the length of the weld and the pitch of the weld. So, for instance, if the length and pitch were 1, 2, that means we would have 1 inch of weld, and then skip from the center of this weld to the center of the next one would be 2 inches. That would be a 1 inch weld, and then you'd have another 1 inch weld, and then you'd skip over 2 inches to the next 1 inch weld. So that's what those numbers would mean. The tail, as I said, sometimes it's there, sometimes not. It's usually omitted if there's no particular reference, but if you need to add some additional notes or something, that usually goes here on the end. And the numbers over here are going to indicate for like fillet welds. You might see the size of the weld over here to the left, like you might have a 1/2 inch fillet weld or a 1/4 inch fillet weld or something like that. And then the groove size here. So you'll see some numbers to the left and to the right of our symbol. You may also see some symbols above our weld symbol, indicating maybe it needs to be ground flush or something to that effect, what type of finish needs to be done to the weld after it is applied. All right, I think that's probably a good stopping point right here. We'll resume this unit in the next video.